All right, good evening, everybody. It is 5:34 p.m. on Wednesday, May 14th, and this is the Policy Review Committee. Present, we have Connor Kurtz, Mike Wolf, Carol Bites, and Mary Beth Kiesel representing the administration. There are no members of the public here. We are at the Daniel Boone District offices, formerly Amity Primary Center, in the library. Now, we haven't met in a while as a committee. Were you on the policy committee before, Mr. Wolf? Okay. All right, let's do it. Mrs. Bites.
Was that a
sneezed.
Carol has, Mrs. Bites has allergies.
Oh, for the record, yes. So, prior to Mr. Wolf joining the committee, I spoke with Mrs. Bites about how we wanted to move forward with the committee after Mrs. Dungan left, because she was our third member. And we came to the conclusion that it would probably be a good idea to meet for a more extended period of time, just to go over some policies that we've neglected to go over in the past few months, just because so many other things have been happening with the board. So in front of us right now we have an agenda, and we wanted to continue discussion on the booster and support organization policy. This is something that Mrs. Bites has been working on, and the previous committee, before the board transitioned in December, put together a proposed policy which is included in this packet and is currently in a draft stage. And I thought it would be good to go through that and to see if we can move that on to the full board for consideration at some point in the future. And I know this is something that a lot of time was invested into at the previous committee, and now I guess we could put our spin onto it if we have any changes we'd like to make prior to it being adopted, if the board chooses to go that route. So
I did read through this, and it's the same as what it was when we let this go.
Yeah.
I wasn't on the committee, but
Yeah.
because I know how this whole thing started with the sports side, and for the music side, they both had input on this,
Yes.
and I thought it was pretty well ready to go because
Okay.
I think they were in agreement with it.
All right. Yeah, I heard that they, I don't want to say approved it. I guess, was it approval? Is that a fair way to characterize it?
They had an opportunity to weigh in on it and provide their comments. I think the concern that we had as a board was that there was district employees involved in handling the money from the sports side.
Yes.
Which that conflict doesn't exist on the music side, but it does on the sports side. I don't know about the PTO that also this applies to. I don't think they did, but I don't have direct knowledge of it.
Yeah. So for the sake of anybody listening to the minutes, we're reviewing this, also trying to clear up that issue with employees handling non-district funds and just trying to keep things separate where they need to be. So yes, this policy hasn't gone through any changes since that point in December. But it would be nice if we could move it along. And I know Mrs. Bites had some thoughts. She had been researching other policies, and
only because I didn't realize this existed.
Okay.
Honestly. And I'd be interested in the administration's take on this. Has this been vetted?
It's been, well,
by the administration also?
It was something that Dr. Otto worked on. I don't believe Dr. Sanker had any comment on it. I'm not sure. But
right, not in committee with us.
Not in committee with us.
She had just been commenting on the ones that we had.
She suggested this committee kind of go on a hiatus almost until we had the new superintendent come in.
My understanding was, my understanding was that it was reviewed from the legal side also.
Okay, I believe that's correct.
When you get to the end, there was something we put in there about if one of these boosted organizations would disband and there's funds left, how they would be treated. And I think Mr. Subers had some input on that. But I can't confirm that. I'm just going by what Dr. Otto had told us.
Okay.
So we may want to have Brian look at it again and make sure.
I think that would be good. And there's also a form attached to the proposed policy with a check sheet that the organization would have to go through and send to the board or send to the administration, an annual report.
I'd be curious, Mrs. Kiesel, have you had a chance to look it over? Or do you have any?
Briefly.
That's fine. That's
Briefly.
fine. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Nor have I. So purchases over $1,000, I saw reference to in here.
Yes.
Must be approved by the superintendent. So purchases.
Or must not be approved, the superintendent must be notified.
And the reason that is for Title IX. We want to make sure that that these boosted organizations are not picking, boys' activities over girls.
Right.
For the music side, it doesn't exist because it's co-ed, but for the sports side, we had to be very sensitive that's why.
So how does that address that, though?
Well,
what about all the $500 purchases as they add up? Who's tracking the Title IX compliance then?
Well, it would be once the superintendent or his or her designee in this case is notified. I mean, the district is liable for Title IX things. It's
Absolutely.
the district's. Yeah, it's not, the boosters don't have that issue. It's our issue. So we're responsible for making sure that we're in compliance.
And the way we're responsible is by their reporting to us.
Well, we're responsible whether they report to us or not, if it's our programs, as far as I understand.
I know, but the only way we have to know is when they report to us.
Well, they report actually to Mrs. Goss, when they purchase something like that for the sports side.
Yeah.
She's notified, and that's her responsibility. It's just another level. As you spend above that threshold, then there's another level of involvement.
Did I miss approval by our employees somewhere in between here then? Or shouldn't all, I guess what I'm getting at is, shouldn't all purchases be approved by the...
Well, they're not, it's important to recognize they're not approved because these are independent organizations. They can spend their money how they want. Is that true?
But because of the tie-in to Title IX, their hands are somewhat tied, as I understand it.
Well, this policy could tie their hands.
Yeah. For our own benefit, we need the policy that ties their hands. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean in a partnership sort of way. So I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about, it's not really spelled out that other policies that I've reviewed spell out who specifically owns the purchases. Once they make them, they really are supposed to become property of the school district. So that if the club disbands or the booster, the organization, the team itself disbands, it's very clear that it is all property of the school. Every purchase they make should be approved by the school and sort of accepted by the school and become school property for their use. I don't know if that's been vetted or not, but
it would need to be.
In discussions we've had with Dr. Sanker through this committee, I thought we established that.
So you would like to add to this proposed policy a line stating that all purchases made by the organization are property of the district?
If I could for a second direct you to the Minnetonka policy that I've seen consistent.
That's on the final page.
On the second page of it, under purchasing.
Or second to last page.
Booster clubs wishing to purchase athletic equipment for their teams must go through the head coach and the athletic department. Booster clubs should not purchase equipment independently. When equipment is purchased from donated funds, it becomes the property of the school district.
Oh, well, how I interpret that from just hearing it is that the district makes the purchase, but the booster organization makes a donation to the district. Not that the booster organization makes the purchase.
Right, so all purchases go through the school district, right?
Okay.
That's exactly right. That's what we're trying to get to.
Okay.
So that they provide the funds.
Well, that I think makes
But the school district actually purchases and owns.
That's a whole lot more legally clear, I think.
I guess at this point, since we haven't had a lot of time to review it, I'd like all of us to review the Minnetonka and compare to the previous committees, and maybe talk about it at the next one.
Yeah.
And see what you guys are picking up on the shortcomings of each.
Yeah, I mean, if we're not ready to move forward with this,
I honestly
then that's
did not
fine.
know. We have been in the committee reinventing the wheel then, because I did not know that this document was in existence, that they had already. And it went before the full board
No.
at some point?
No, it was only through the committee.
You were on the committee?
No.
And how were you exposed to it?
Because I'm also part of the booster organization, so,
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard about it,
Yeah, this was something.
This all started, how the roots of this started was the football sports program had received a donation for some cash value for football equipment. I think it was uniforms. I'm not sure what else. And we found out about it, quite frankly, when the students showed up at the game with these uniforms on.
Yep.
And, so of course one question led to another, and then, we found out how that all came about. Mr. Hankel wasn't involved because, the colors were not Daniel Boone colors. He should have, as well as Mrs. Goss, should have been notified and knew about it, which Mrs. Goss did, but Mr. Hankel didn't, and he should have approved it. So that's kind of the
impetus.
The genesis of this.
Yeah, that's how this kind of started, but I think they were starting to look that way anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because there was Mrs. Hamill had concerns because coaches were taking funds for fundraisers and using it in ways that the parents weren't had objected to or didn't notify. That, well, like the music side, when you have a fundraiser, you know how much you're going to receive personally, and they have an online on the district website. You can go in, put your student ID number in there, and you can see exactly how much you've earned and what's in your personal account. Well, apparently that doesn't exist on the sports side, or didn't exist on the sports side.
And I'm not sure that it can exist on the sports side.
Why not?
Yeah.
Individual accounts?
Sure. Because if you're fundraising and you're going to get $1 for every pizza you sell, and you sell 10, you should be able to look in a column and say, pizza fundraiser, $10, and under my name, and I know it.
How it worked when I was in middle school for the music programs, they would always post, it's weird saying this, but I guess it was in a time when, the internet was obviously around when I was in middle school, but they also had a lot of hard copies of things posted, and they had a large board, and it had all these different columns, and we had to find our student ID number, and over the course of the year, I know we sold wreaths, we sold candles and pizzas, and for every $10 we sold, the music boosters would get a share, and then we would get a personal share in our account from their proceeds, and we would be able to use that to offset the cost of trips, offset the cost of books, instrument rentals maybe, and I guess, so that would be possible, I guess.
I love that idea, but I thought we had vetted that with Mrs. Goss. Ms. Goss, and that wasn't possible. But we can revisit that.
Yeah,
I don't know
something with the PIAA rules
that
you can't get, that has to go for everybody or nobody. In fact, I have the law on that. We had two different interpretations on that. But once you get into the PIAA rules versus the music rules, where we can establish our own, there is no overriding authority.
Yeah, because
unlike the
subject to
PIAA.
Title IX and the other one's
Yeah.
not.
Okay.
Yeah. So, this is all the stuff we've been through in my committee that hasn't passed. Just so you know, we've been.
Well, yeah,
going
when you said there was
this,
multiple ones that hadn't gone, I was like, wow, we had this great document that we worked on for months, and wow, I can't believe we shot it down because it was all but.
And how did that come down? Where did that come from today?
So,
because I'm wondering why I
that is
had
something
access to
that, and I'm sorry, I should have sent it, I guess, to you
before.
You
did know that?
Well, I was on the committee before, and this is something that, so the previous committee was myself, Mr. Sermonero, he chaired it, Mr. Basil, and was Mrs. Hamill on it?
I don't know.
I don't remember. I think maybe Mrs. Hamill was. And
I think she was, because she was
one
like
who brought the issue.
one of the principal drivers of getting this policy because
Okay.
of what was happening on that side.
And it was towards the end of the previous board's term, and this was something that was going through and the whole process, and we So originally, it just came to the committee as an idea.
Right,
like
that's where
idea.
I kind of thought we were with that. I didn't realize somebody had actually documented all that.
And then this is something that Mr. Basil and Mr. Sermonero and the administration had put together, and there was a lot of feedback from them in crafting the policy.
Okay.
And the booster organizations then had the opportunity to weigh in on it.
Wow.
And this is
Okay.
where I thought you knew about
I
this.
did
You had
not,
copies,
no.
which is why.
I have been researching
Because we
from...
wanted to know, if they have monthly meetings, do they show, all their financials to their membership? Is all that available to them? And then once all these things for the budget, when they have a budget, is that announced at meetings for, there was a lot of things that went into it, which is that checklist you see in the back, so you can see financials. The district wants to make sure, obviously, that they're bonded. They have like these funds accounted for. They were audited. I think that was and we gave them 2 ways they could do an audit. I think an outside auditor or an audit
Sounds
committee.
like you covered a lot of the things that I was trying to
auditor,
cover.
auditing firm, or audit committee of the organization.
So maybe since we have this document, and it's not fair
Can we just
for
go-
Carol that we could go through it. And
By the same token, I feel it's not fair for me to even to present it if you guys have already done so much.
Well,
work on it.
I mean, you could still.
But if we
yeah,
do
there's
it,
always. I mean, it's still
there
in
might
draft
be an
form.
idea.
And
If we could.
What I would hope we could do is take the great things from these policies
Yeah.
and meld them together with the great policy that we already have in
Right, because your
development.
point too, that things purchased for
Right.
for the program to become the property of the district. I mean, I don't know specifically. It may be in here. I
I didn't notice it
I
real
don't know.
quick, and I don't see
Just
about
glancing
that.
through it, I
Like the
didn't see
count
anything.
thing, though, I mean, we can revisit that at the next meeting. I can do the research on that, but pretty much it was done and eliminated, ruled out that you can't have individual
For
accounts.
sports.
For sports.
Yeah.
And I might be wrong, but I'll go back and let me get that research together.
And if PIAA
Let's see.
has their regulations, and there's no
Yeah.
need to tie the hands of the music boosters to conform with PIAA
Right.
regulations.
Right,
They
exactly.
don't have to.
But there-
Exactly, it's not-
But that's okay because even I don't see that as a problem anyway because even the music side doesn't have individual accounts for like chorus versus marching band
it's
versus
all
this.
individual
It's all
students.
one account, but
Yeah.
it's more important that the issue at the heart of this was the parents didn't know what money was being spent for what. Mm-hmm. And with these fundraisers, they think, well, how do I know that my child got this? Because there's nowhere it tells me that they have $50 in their account, and instead of going out, like you said, and buying cleats. Well, they can buy.
Right.
They can use that as credit towards cleats. So I
Right.
think there was, and I think that was part of it.
Okay, so I would submit respectfully that we just meld these two together,
Sure,
that
well-
everybody here, and you vet it on your end, and see if you're picking up that there's something from here that should be in here.
Yeah. Like that's
'Cause
what-
this one pretty much covered the issues that I was aware of that we were trying to address, fundraising out of season. There is some thinking that teams shouldn't be fundraising all year round because, for one thing, if a spring sport is fundraising in the fall, the previous fall, they really don't even know who's on the team yet.
Mm-hmm.
So they shouldn't be making promises to people, or inferred promises that if you fundraise, if you meet the fundraising obligations of the spring sport team, you're automatically on.
Oh, on
Because
like
it is
made
a
the
little
team,
bit-
like
yeah.
Okay.
There is
Right.
some, and then if they're raising money in the
I see.
fall, well, does that parent go, well, we raised all that money, how can you cut my kid?
Right.
The inference there that
You owe me something.
you owe me something, yeah, or I thought we had an
Right.
arrangement here, and that shouldn't apply. And furthermore, if it's a spring sport and you're hitting our same pool of
Yeah.
benefactors that the spring sports should be hitting at that time, which or excuse me, the fall sports, lacrosse or whatever,
Yeah.
hockey should be fundraising during the hockey time, and tennis should be fundraising during tennis time, and this policy was making an attempt at controlling some of the fundraising practices like that also. So as you pour through them, maybe you can keep those things in mind.
Yeah. So I think that would be good to identify the areas in this policy that we have proposed that might be holes that you'd like to fill in, and then we could just go through at our next meeting, line by line, and insert language where we'd like to at that point.
And there were a couple things that I could bring up that weren't in here that we still need to discuss. But again, if we could all just, you guys having not read this and me not having read this, and
yeah,
maybe that would be the appropriate way to handle that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. I'm happy about that.
So, in the interim, do we have anything else we want to discuss about the booster and support organization policy, or do we want to go back, review things, and talk about it next meeting?
I think that would be best.
Yeah, I think
from my end.
I think from the discovery end.
Yeah, the discovery end. And maybe.
Yeah. I mean, because there's a lot of work put into this.
Yeah.
I mean, there's maybe some good ideas in here, just to be able to reconcile this.
Yeah.
Maybe your ideas that we have. If there's any way to, polish this up a little bit.
Yeah.
And maybe maybe a shorter time frame then for the next meeting.
Yeah.
Maybe we only need 2 weeks.
And then again,
to get back together.
When we get close to finishing our portion of it, to re-engage the two booster organizations, make sure that they have an opportunity to understand before this policy goes into effect. Here's the rules of the road.
Yeah.
What do you have any problems?
What's the reality of it?
I mean, if there's something in here that's like, well, you're asking for something I can't possibly get here, something.
Yeah.
Right.
We don't need to make things, this policy is going to make things a little bit more complicated because I guess it's the nature of policies, but we don't want to
We've got to cover make sure the district's covered.
Yeah.
Right. At the same time, we want it to be practical for them, and maybe Mrs. Kiesel, then she can flush some of those problems out.
Mrs. Kiesel, do you have anything to weigh in on discussions?
No.
Okay. All right, then. I guess we could move on to new business. I know we received in the past, Mrs. Dungan, myself, and Mrs. Weiss, an email from Mr. Martino about looking at public participation in meetings. Did he forward that email to you as well?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think we should look at the policy. I'm not sure I want to make any changes. That's my personal opinion. I'm not sure yet, but I think it would be worthy. I think it's worth looking at. And maybe it's a little bit, maybe we should clarify whether your 2 minutes is for the entire meeting or whether it's for each section.
We're discussing 006
then, right?
We're going to look at 006 first. There are two policies, and in Daniel Boone's policies, there's a lot of duplication in different areas. And there's another policy, I believe it's 902, and that also covers participation by public in meetings. Now, policy 006 is meetings in general, so it covers almost every facet of the meeting that we have. So the area, if we're going to be talking about public participation, would be section 7, and that's on page 3 of 9. .3 minutes. I don't know why I said 2 minutes. 3 minutes to address the board.
Well, for one, I do think 3 minutes is too long. And I've seen other school districts out there that do only have 2. So I'd like that considered. And I think Mr. Martino was asking us to consider how frequently they can use their 2 minutes, or at which meetings and all.
Now, for the sake, I guess, of the committee, I know there are different ways public participation is done in different districts. There are some districts that require people who would like to speak to the board to submit a request to either the board or the administration prior to the meeting, and then they're included on the agenda.
Right. I've seen that, where any discussion over 2 minutes is
or not only that, but any discussion even under 2 minutes.
Okay.
If the public wants to weigh in, they have to request.
I like that. Get on the agenda. They have to actually request a place on the agenda.
Yes, they have to request a place on the agenda.
I've seen that as well.
Okay.
Now that's just, I'm only throwing that out there as a way other districts do it, or some other districts do it. This is a pretty touchy subject, and I'm saying this as somebody who's been a member of the public and who's spoken many times as a member of the public.
But isn't that good for the public too, to be offered an opportunity to be on the agenda? I mean,
I think that is more organized, and I guess it could help the meetings be a little bit more organized as well. Certainly in that regard, yes.
So in what cases would they requested they're on the agenda?
In any case, if they want to address the board.
I think it's an undue hardship because there's a lot of folks that they come to the meetings, they're not necessarily prepared like we would be. Something comes up that they've heard, or somebody else has made a point or has a question, and then they have a question based on that person's question.
Yes, and that's the other. And
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and I don't understand. I mean, I do understand. I'm trying to figure out how I feel really about public participation, because I do think it's very valuable, and to get the opinions of those in the audience and to have that understanding. So I'm trying to figure out where, but that being said, it is a meeting of the board, and my understanding of these meetings has changed over time. Prior to joining the board, I, as a member of the public, believed that members of the public were an equal part of the conversation. But from now, my understanding after going to the PASBA training and all of that, what we do is, the public are there to witness the actions of the board, not necessarily participate. That's what we were told by PASBA. I don't know, so I'm trying to figure out in my own mind, and this is just my personal struggle with this, where do those meet? Where does the desires of the board to move quickly almost conflict with the right of the struggling to participate in the meeting? So again, I'm still
I'd be interested in Mrs. Kiesel's experience. You said you are familiar with that practice?
I have seen it before in other districts. I don't remember where, but I think one method was that people signed up after reading the agenda to address something, but they also had the opportunity to,
Okay.
So
that corresponds. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
That corresponds to what I saw on the Conestoga website, where I think it was 2 minutes. Any time a member of the public had more to say than 2 minutes, they signed up for agenda time.
Okay.
So they would limit their comments if they had one, and they would have the option and the spontaneity to join in at any time. But if their topic was going to involve, engaging the board, they would have to get on.
Now, how much time would they be allowed if they got onto the agenda?
I guess that would be up.
It depend on this. Okay.
The limit is on the podium time.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is they might not get on that agenda. It might be the next agenda. Yeah, I'm not sure. In practice, I think that it would work out like that, though. That whoever's creating the agenda, the superintendent, thinks it's more appropriate to be on the agenda at like maybe the subsequent meeting. So it would have to be. They would have to see the agenda posted.
I think you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
Because the little girl that came to the podium in support of her music program, her prepared speech was just under 4 minutes. Were you really going to say, your time is over, please have a seat? No, you're not.
Well, of course, we always have the option to extend the remarks, but
that's contrary to what we're putting in here. So she went over.
Well, once she knew the policy was 2 minutes, then she would limit her speech to 2 minutes, or ask to be on the agenda. Once the policy changed, people will adapt to that.
For me,
and I've seen people from other school districts. Conrad Weiser was one where they had an issue, and somebody came up to the podium and they started their prepared speech. At the end of their time, they said, "Your time's up." Someone else came up. I have the same opinion. I have the same view. I want to yield my time to this person to continue.
Yeah.
So.
And did they allow that at Conrad Weiser?
I'm sorry?
Was that allowed at Conrad Weiser? Did the board allow them to yield? Oh.
That's what. And this all came up when we had the racial incident 2 years ago, and we had the gentleman who wasn't a taxpayer, wasn't a resident, that wanted to speak for the group. And, you know, like, all right, in that situation, how can that be possible?
Mm-hmm.
And then we found, a way was found that he could be a spokesman for that group, or they would yield their time as a group for that person to speak on their behalf. I don't know that I'd be in favor of reducing the time from 3 minutes to 2.
Yeah,
Or, you know, I think our practice, I don't think it gets abused.
Yeah. I think the potential is there for it to be abused, and if that happens, I think then we might need to look at the policy. And my thinking on that is just because at Committee of the Wholes we allow public comment after each section, so conceivably people could get up after each section, and if you have 100 people there and they each get 3 minutes, there's 300 minutes right
5
there.
hours of comment.
Now that being said, I think
how many times in our tenure has that happened?
yes, yeah,
It happened, you know, with that racial incident, and for good reason. There's a lot of people had a lot of things to say about it.
Yeah.
Understood.
And in the end, we're all human anyway, including members of the public, and they'll recognize at some point, I'm sure, that we need to move on. So it hasn't really, like Mr. Wolf said, I don't think it's been abused. I agree.
I do see it as sort of a quid pro quo, though. If we cut them down to 2 minutes but offer them a place on the agenda, I think that helps us with the members of the public who are just being spontaneously reactive to something that they've heard and maybe not have anything really concrete that they want to say. They're just emotional, they want to weigh in, and 2 minutes should be plenty of time for them.
I think,
to make that
to
known.
your point, could it be something where, you know, how you have to sign in at the meeting? And
No, it would be in advance. If you wanted to get on the agenda, you'd have to come.
Well, the agendas are written. I know
Right.
we've been trying to
to
get our
posted
stuff
by
into
Wednesday.
the agenda early.
They have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and that day Monday to get on the agenda.
No, for public comment, I mean, for the public comment.
That's what I'm
Oh, for
talking about,
that,
too.
would it just be open like it is now?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Just limit it to 2 minutes with the understanding that if they had something they were passionate about and really wanted a bigger discussion on it, will have had to
So,
contact.
like, let's say I'm a member of the public and I want to speak to the board about.
They see something coming up on the agenda.
Let me say, let's say library books. I want to purchase more library books or something for the district, or I want the district to purchase more library books. That isn't on the agenda, but let's say I want to give a 5-minute presentation on why it's important to buy more library books.
No, that's not.
I would call.
That's not what that's about. It's about commenting about what's on the agenda.
Well, I'm talking about getting onto the agenda.
Well, that's not this policy.
Well, we're talking
This is
about
not
changing
what
the
we're talking
policy.
about. But it's not under the scope of this policy. We're talking about commenting on agenda items.
Okay,
So if they
for
want to
that,
comment
you're
on
saying,
agenda items,
so you're just saying 2 minutes for that comment.
when Mr. Durso came to address us and he handed us out his own
Yes.
agenda, really that should have been put on the agenda, and he should have been on the agenda as an item, as his own
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out how to get onto the agenda. So I have
He
to-
should have requested to be on the agenda. If he has an agenda and his public comment period is going to be more than what I'm proposing, 2 minutes, then he should be on the agenda for everybody to know that he's going to be on the agenda and speaking, and give him the time that he's due. We shouldn't use that as the public comment period, And given that opportunity for them to be on the agenda to talk about an agenda item for more than 2 minutes, then they should be restricted to 2 minutes at the podium.
Well,
It's sort of a
I'm just
trade-off.
playing devil's advocate here for having members of the public on the agenda like that. Who would be the one to determine how, like, let's say, I don't want to use Mr. Durso as an example, I'll use me as an example again. Let's say I want to give a 30-minute presentation. Who says, no, you can have 5 minutes? Who says, no, you can have 2 minutes? Who says, the administration?
The people
would say
who are
that.
putting together the agenda.
Okay,
Right.
so that would
And
be the president.
have the time constraints of the meeting in mind.
Yes.
So
Okay.
we'd love to have your comments. If you can do a 5-minute presentation, you may be on the agenda. Otherwise, you're going to be
And who
restricted.
determines then who's placed on the agenda? Would it be, because I could see that being an issue. Let's say
Same
the
thing.
superintendent or the board president
people
doesn't
putting
want
it
a
together.
specific person on the agenda.
Then
Do
they
they
would
have the
to
ability
just have
to?
their
Okay.
podium time. Right. I mean, I could do some more research
Oh,
into it.
I'm-
I could just tell you that that's what I
Yeah, I'm just saying
observed in my
I can
research.
foresee issues with that.
with I think it was Conestoga School District. They had their meetings run on time. They have very orderly, they don't run till midnight. And I was trying to take a page out of them, and that's one of their techniques.
Yeah.
If that's the goal of changing the policy, the public participation policy, that's one idea.
And I'm trying to figure out what is the goal. Is the goal... Oh.
Lights out?
The lights just turned off.
It must be on a timer.
Or maybe it's motion sensor.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, they're on
How about that?
saving energy.
Isn't that the only reason why we're looking at it?
I think the reason, for the sake of...
We're trying to keep the meetings a little more efficient?
Yeah, that's my understanding. And I don't know if the issue really is with public participation. It might just be more with we like to talk a lot, and we have a lot we're going through.
No, I
And
do
that's
have an
why.
issue like Mr. Martino does with the length of the comment period. I personally do. I guess you guys don't, so then it doesn't go anywhere, but I do. I think
Well, I'm
Mr.
just trying
Martino
to-
said none, and I'm saying 2.
I'm just trying to...
And you're saying leave it at 3.
Well, we have an issue now with 3 where sometimes people will go on and...
Yeah, because
and
we
it's up to the
stretch 3 to
president
4.
Well,
If
because
we have
it's not
2,
a-
we can stretch 2 to 3.
Well, right, because it's not really you give up and give a presentation by the public. It's I have a presentation and then I end it with a question,
Yes.
which demands a response, which is another question, and it becomes a
dialogue.
dialogue
It's
instead
not
of public
supposed
comment.
to.
Yeah, and I agree that it's not supposed to be a
not
dialogue.
Yeah, it
supposed
should
to
be a
public comment.
presentation,
It's a-
really.
it's
If you want to have a
comment.
dialogue, you should run through the
Supposed to-
board and be
Right.
elected. That's our
Right.
purpose, to have a
Right.
dialogue.
Or you can fire off an email
And-
or send a letter.
Looking at this policy, it does say that each resident shall have 3 minutes. When the 3 minutes are over, the resident or taxpayer will be asked to be seated.
Correct.
At that point, then I think the board member should respond. If there's
May
a
or may
question.
not.
May or may not. Yes, not should, but may or may not.
There's no
And
obligation.
then there's not a dialogue. But so often what
Correct.
we see is the member will begin to turn. I mean, the member of the public will
Correct.
begin to turn around and then come back when somebody
Correct.
begins responding.
The menu.
But that isn't an issue with the policy. It's a matter. It's an issue with the enforcement, I'd say, of the policy.
Agreed.
See, right. I mean, have you been to other places? Like, no, I think Why Missing has one where you have a little red, green, and red, green,
and
and
that's
yellow.
helpful because then you don't have
You start. You have your 30-second warning before you're done, which is your yellow, and when you're red, you're done. Please have a seat.
I like that. I wish we could.
Loved-
That and
Mrs. Kiesel?
microphones. Yeah.
You're liking that too?
Just hold up a little card, red,
Yeah.
green, yellow.
Yellow card. Yeah. Flag.
And what is that? Some sort of electronic device?
Yeah.
And the member of the public sets it themselves when they approach the podium?
I don't know.
It's probably on a timer. And
I was only there. I was there for the Burke CIT, and we happened to have our board there, and they had all of them had nice microphones and a nice setup in the boardroom, and they had this little device there.
Kind
And I
of
was
a
like,
nice,
wow, I
subtle
knew-
way to do things.
Yeah.
But it
rather
was in
than
front- it
saying-
was-
And then there's no
Yes.
argument
Yes.
afterwards. Like,
I mean,
and
if
they
you
own
look-
it. If they're setting it themselves and they're
Right,
watching
if you look
it.
at Congress also,
Yeah.
and some of the hearings, they all have like that comment where the senators or whoever's doing that, they have a period and they have like a 30-second turns yellow and they know when it red.
And which
You're
school
supposed to start
district is that?
That happened to be Why Missing.
Could you look into that for us,
Sure.
Mrs. Kiesel?
Yeah.
Sure.
I would love some more information on that.
There was
Is that
nobody
good?
there I could ask questions. I just noticed it because we had our meeting there, and it was right up there in the front of the desk by, I assume, like the president or the superintendent, who would be sitting at the end of the
I mean,
the table.
everybody complains about the length of the meetings, and the
Yeah.
public and the board is drained.
Mhm.
I'm just looking for mechanisms to move the
Yeah,
meetings
like
along.
I think this would be helpful because then, like, so often you'll have the president say your time is up, and then well, can I just finish up? If
Yep.
you have something
Yep.
visual
Yep.
that shows your time is almost up, well,
Right, and you're
time to wrap
managing
up.
your time. If it's sending your little signals, you're managing your time to stay on point
Yeah.
for what I'm suggesting is 2 minutes. I think 3 minutes. If you've ever given a speech, a public speech, 3 minutes is a long time to stand in public.
Yeah,
I think you could
It
cover.
depends on who we have come to the podium because we
taking-
have a lot of the same people that do, and they do take every bit of that 3 minutes.
But if you
and then-
take away the dialogue, it's not.
I agree 100%.
I think that you could say what you need to
You're-
say
And I think
in
that's
2
what we-
minutes if you're commenting
I
after
think-
each section.
So I'll just say I do not support changing the time at this point. That's my opinion now after this discussion. But I do think that this needs to be more enforced, and there should not be a dialogue. the person has their right to their 3 minutes.
They talk, they get dinged.
They have their 3 minutes, their time is up.
And then they leave, and we choose to comment or not.
Yes, and I think that's on us to make sure
that
we don't interrupt them. And the president says, like if somebody has 2 minutes left and they ask a question, then the president should say, you must ask all your questions, and the board will or will not reply afterwards. But it can't be, we should not be eating into their time, and conversely, they should not be eating into time that is not allocated to them.
Are you comfortable with making
that's not a change.
That's, I think it's a reinforcement of the committees.
I think it's I think it's something we should have to educate the public on and not spring it on them at the meeting. Well, by the way, the rules changed.
Yeah.
What he's saying is we're not talking about changing the rules. The recommendation that we might have
the procedure
unanimity on.
Do
we have unanimity in saying that should be enforced?
Because past precedent. Unfortunately, we have past precedent on how we do this. It is a dialogue. Right. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong.
Right.
I mean, but for this, if you're going to file this policy, then when they sign in, they start talking. Their 3 minute stops. When they're done, their 3 minutes, they're done. They leave, and if we have comment or we'd like to respond, that's
to the whole public.
And that raises another question that I've wondered. Let's say I'm at the podium and I'm speaking, and I ask a question. And a board member begins to reply. Does my time stop and then resume when I begin
because
speaking?
It wasn't intended,
or does it continue?
But most of the things we get are questions.
Yeah.
They should be submitting. We can ask the public. We can remind the public. The question specifically should be
a question. Like they can go through they can go through a list of questions when they have their 3 minutes. Somebody could write them down, whether that's the recording secretary or the president or the superintendent.
Right.
And then if
when
the board
they
chooses,
leave,
the board could
like a call-in radio
individually.
program, they hang up and then they listen.
And I think that's the way. This is my opinion of this. I think that's what this is meant to do, in a way. Because it doesn't mention anything about a dialogue. It's just you have your 3 minutes. Then when you're done your 3 minutes, you will be asked to be seated. And at that point,
I would just caution.
Yeah, that we communicate it to the public.
Not just communicate it, but you've used the liberal interpretation of this policy over the years. So has Mr. Martino. So have I.
Yeah.
When I was as a member of public, and we are always engaged because we want an answer.
Yeah.
We've come there, we make our statement, we get an answer. But I think to get that whole dialogue and answer should be within that 3 minute time frame. And if you don't get all the answers to your questions, we'll have to,
It's not. That's just the nature of the beast.
We should be responding to the public.
Yeah.
I feel. I'm very hesitant about limiting people's input because there is so much spontaneous thoughts and questions that come up in the course of our meeting. I really resist that.
I'm fine with responding to the public, but that's not our only mechanism at a board meeting when they're rare to have us all together and we have to make decisions. That to engage, the 6,000 people in the community is not efficient. The most efficient way to do it. They always have access to us, phone calls, emails, letters, and I guess we have unanimity in saying we want this policy enforced.
Well, regardless of what we want, the policy's I think every board member should want every policy.
We just don't have a mechanism for enforcing it other than, there's been folks that we know that can't come up and are going to have this long diatribe, and, we would get out our phones, it would be a contest sometime between Walt and I. We'd start our phones as soon as they start talking, and it'd be like 4.5 minutes, and they're still out there, and we're trying to get Andrew's attention, come on,
Yeah. So I think it's important just to.
But we are unanimous in making a recommendation to the full board that we should be more vigilant about.
Sure.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think that would be fair. If it's in our policy, we should be sticking to it. As long as we
communicate it adequately with the public, that the past practice, Mr. Wolf's point is well made, we're not going to be doing that anymore. There's other ways to get your full thoughts.
I think it's just
we're going to
reining
it in. We're going to start, getting back.
Get up, get efficient, say what you need to say.
Because they
sit down, and we'll
especially
address
the committee of the whole, they have an opportunity with every section to get up and talk.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I can agree with that.
So, and then we're 2-1 on whether to cut it to 3 minutes. Can we at least say that we had a discussion?
We had a
You're not
discussion.
interested in limiting the time with that?
I don't feel comfortable changing it from 3 minutes.
I would love to change it to 2. And our administration, you have any comments on that one way or the other?
I would like to research it a little bit
Okay.
more and see what other districts are doing.
Okay, that'd be great. That would be great.
And I can certainly
If she
do
could
that.
Get back to us.
I think that's fine.
Like I said, I only looked at comments.
But
the
for
other day.
now, I think we
And there's
leave
gonna
it
be
at,
no
I
change
think
on that.
it'll be a big enough change just going back to what
And that will be a help.
says.
That will be
So
a help.
I think that's enough for
Okay.
now.
Somebody who sent us that link about the person who had a problem with the book, he said, well, you exceeded your 2 minutes. So if he would have been on our board, he wouldn't have been arrested.
Yeah.
Because he had 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Excuse me, I guess the bottom line is people want to be heard, and,
Yeah.
and it's sometimes difficult.
I just think we give them plenty of opportunities because they get to comment in each section, and at the start and at the end of each voting meeting, they have access to us with email, which is a modern innovation. In the past,
Right.
we didn't have that.
I mean,
We get emailed, and we do get emailed, plenty emailed. We get and they get calls, and they can send a letter. There's way ways
And this
for
is
people
unique.
to weigh in.
This is unique for
in the middle of a
government.
meeting where we're trying to get a lot of business done.
Right.
We're wearying down
Yes.
so that at the end of the meeting, when I have important decisions to make, I'm weary,
Exhausted.
and I'm not giving it my best effort. And I implore the public to be sympathetic to that with us. They don't
Yeah.
come week after week, month after month, meeting after meeting, reading all this stuff in between. We need to be efficient at our 2 months.
And it is interesting, and I guess unique of local government that the public has the ability to participate.
They
You
can.
can't do that in Congress.
That's great.
You can't
I'm
do that in
thrilled
the
that they
state
can. I'm not
legislature.
trying to silence
Oh,
them by
absolutely,
shortening
yeah.
them to 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I think it's generous.
I think for now, I mean, I've made my.
I
view
hear
on
you.
it.
I hear you. We will respectfully disagree.
Yeah. All right. Are we
I
ready?
will wait for you to weigh in on that if you
Yeah.
don't mind. Thank you.
All right. So moving on now, if we're ready, to 3.2 on the agenda, which is policy 6.1, and that's teleconferencing policy. This is something that Mr. Martino wanted us to look at as well. He sent this in an email to the previous membership of the committee, Suzanne, Dungan, Mrs. Bites, and myself. And he wanted to change the teleconferencing policy to eliminate the stipulation that it's only a majority of meetings. And that was in response, I think, to some questions from the public about how much participation is permitted. And I feel like I almost shouldn't weigh in because I'm the one who uses this policy most frequently. That being said, other board members are free to, and other board members have in the past.
So which part of this?
I want to find.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it too. The present policy is not more than 50%, and we want to change it to
Correct.
not more than, as long as it's not a.
Where is it on here? Here, on page 203, right next to procedure. Participation in meetings via communication device may not exceed a majority of all regularly scheduled voting meetings in a calendar year for any board members. And now, I don't know in the past if, I'll just say me, if I've come close to exceeding a majority. It does say calendar year, so that is
And who is tracking
helpful.
that? I mean, that's just
So that's 11.
not practical.
Yeah, in the regular. All right, so that's 11 times 2. That's 22 meetings we have a year. If you're not, I'm not including committee meetings, which I don't know if this.
I believe this does not count, and it's interesting also because I was in the audience when this policy was being considered. This was passed by the previous board, or two previous boards now in 2011, and I remember there being a discussion about both this limit and about committee meetings. And let me see if it is in here. Because I do not believe it's limited for committees. It's only limited for board meetings. Now, I wondered in the past, our committee of the wholes are advertised as voting meetings. However, at the end of the month, our meetings where we traditionally always vote are called voting meetings.
Well, it says here, the definition of a meeting is any public meeting of the board at which discussion and/or official action takes place. Well, official action can only take place when we have a quorum.
Yes. So it couldn't happen in a committee meeting.
But at which discussion and/or. So
But under procedure, it does say just
special
the voting.
special
meeting.
work sessions and committee meetings are not included.
Yes. So there we go.
So
Committee
we're
meetings are
back
not,
to the 22 number.
Yes.
So you'd have to miss more than 11.
Yeah.
So we're calling the school board meetings and the committee of the whole voting meetings?
They are advertised as voting
Yeah.
meetings
Okay,
always.
okay,
Um,
okay.
So we have established there. So that is committee of the
So
whole
it's those 22.
and voting.
meetings
And otherwise, what would
earlier.
happen, like let's say somebody has participated in their quota, so they participated in 11, then I guess they would just not be permitted to participate anymore remotely if they requested.
Well, what's the adjudication of this? What's the... This only says permits when, how many. Doesn't say if
I
you've
guess
reached
that-
your limit,
Yeah,
then
they're
what?
just
Yeah, it
absent.
doesn't.
They're just absent.
Yeah, you
They're
just-
just not there.
Yeah, not present. That's my understanding, at least. It doesn't have
So-
that. There's
What are we looking to change there? Make it unlimited?
well, we were just asked to review it by Mr. Martino, I believe.
What
I
is he
think
thinking?
I think he wanted to strike that language, saying that pretty much opening the floodgates. I'll use that terminology to allow remote participation.
Unlimited. I'm not comfortable with unlimited, without any limits, because one of the comments I heard from the public at one of the recent meetings is how people are not there to be accountable to the public for the decisions they're making. So we certainly wouldn't want to create a situation, and this is not anything against you personally, where somebody is voting a little bit more voraciously or a little bit more antagonistically and hiding
And that
behind,
could be an issue. You could have
the fact that they're not there and can escape the public
yes.
accountability.
You could
we
have-
should be present to face our public when we're making hard choices.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
again,
true.
it's not your case.
Yeah,
I'm not implying
yes.
that you're saying that.
And
So
thank you for clarifying
I would
that.
want some limits on it, and I don't have a problem with majority. At 50-50, you should be there, not routinely. We can't elect people who never
Yeah.
plan to make a school board meeting, so the rest of us are there facing the public for the hard decisions and controversial decisions, and the others are not. Personally, I don't know.
Yeah,
How
I
do you-
understand that.
how do you
I'm
all
trying to
feel
look at
about
it
that?
from looking at it from a philosophical point of view. Almost, we are elected by the public, and I think that the public deserves to have board members who participate to their maximal ability. And if we can make it easier for board members to do that, then great. And this would be a way. But I'm not sure. I can only speak for myself, and I'm the one who uses policy most. I don't think I exceed a majority on
I
a
don't
personal
think you do
level,
either.
so I don't
So
think
I'm
it
not-
really is an issue.
And plus,
for me.
think of it, if I'm the public, I voted you into office, okay? You missed 11 meetings, and now you couldn't represent me at all.
Yeah. Now,
You know, because he couldn't take part in it. You know, he's in your situation,
Yeah.
in your
Yeah.
unique situation. You're
And he shouldn't be on the board at all. If he misses 11 meetings, he shouldn't.
well, here's what.
Well,
So
yeah, that's a-
my
there's
my
there's
feeling
another
is
question.
you're
There's a
supposed to
different-
be representing the public. You should be there.
here's what. So let me just. So right now, that's only saying. Like, it's not. Well, we're looking at this almost with the assumption that if we're not participating remotely, we're not going to be present. We can still show up, and I'm saying we, board members, can still, like, you can call into 11 if you want, and then you're not barred from participating. You just must be present physically to participate. Does that make sense?
you could only use this policy for 50% of the meetings
Yes.
that are covered under this.
Yes, I could. So a board member could.
That's still a lot, though.
It is, yeah. And then we could show up to Yeah, it's just...
Yeah, I'm thinking about this.
Yeah, think about it. Give it some thought. We've heard both sides.
Well, I mean, I'm not even necessarily advocating changing it at this point. I'm just...
Well, that's all I'm saying. I'm saying I think it's a good policy.
Because
I like it.
I know in your situation, you make every effort to get plane, trains, and automobiles to get up here.
Yeah, I do.
And we certainly don't want to hinder you at the same time. We don't want to open
and I don't...
somebody to abuse it.
As I try to participate, and again, I don't want to make this all about me, I try to participate in person with as much... I always try to. If it's possible for me to be here, I'm here. And that's why I don't call in. I don't think I'm in danger of violating this policy.
Yeah, I'd rather not talk about it on personal levels.
Yeah, well, I agree. I mean, I can't help it.
And this still does not preclude a member from phoning in to every committee meeting, by the way. Because there's nothing in here that stops it. This is the voting meetings, and the public is there.
And the rationale for the board...
I think the board members should be there.
The rationale for the...
Especially in June.
Especially the June one.
The rationale for the committees was that, on the previous board, I'm not speaking for the previous board, but some of the rationale was that these committee meetings are they're the time and the place to go into these issues in more depth, not necessarily the voting meetings and not the committee of the whole meetings. It's the committee meetings where it's not about passing something or not passing something.
Right.
It's about coming to a consensus.
Right.
And for that reason alone, you want to have as much participation as possible. So why should there be a limit? I believe that was the thinking.
But again, the committee meetings are specifically outside the definition.
And that's why, for the sake of this policy.
So you can have a board member not physically present in the community for many, many, many board meetings.
Well, board members are still required to live in the community.
Absolutely.
And otherwise, they're not allowed to serve
Right,
as
but they
board
can
members.
travel on business.
Yes,
or
and that was an
school.
issue with other board members in the past. They were traveling.
So when you think about our participation, it's like maybe 3-to-1 for every one voting meeting we go to. We're in 3 committee meetings, maybe 4.
Sure. Well, it depends on your committee, I guess.
3/4 of your obligation as a board member you can conduct from the road using modern technology. We're only asking for 25% of your time, of your commitment to be physically in the district.
Well, I think we're getting
I
think we're running into some issues if we try to assign
25%
values.
I'm saying based on the fact that we're in committees and they can call in to committees.
So you would...
There's no limit on committees. I'm not saying there should be. I'm saying the policy as it is pretty darn fair. You have to be at a majority of the voting meetings.
Physically.
Physically. You have to physically be at a majority of the... I don't see any reason to change it, but I'm open for any...
I think...
I can't see it.
Yeah, it was never defined what that should be, but, I mean, I wouldn't have a problem putting a number on there, a percentage, or however...
Well, it is. It's majority. What's this 51%?
Are you talking about committee meetings, or are you talking about...
No, I'm not even proposing
Well,
that. I'm saying this is 51% right now, the way it is, a majority. The current policy is 50.
On page 2, yes.
May not exceed, has to be, can't go over 49%.
Yeah, so the limit in effect right now is half of the meetings, which is 11. So you can only participate remotely up to 11 meetings. And then you have to be here in person, or you just can't be here. So that's how it is now, and we were just
And then if you're not making them, then you're accountable to the people at election time, whether they want to.
Well, you're always
And
accountable.
that's another policy if somebody doesn't do their duty. I know we did that one.
Yeah, there was...
voted on that one a year or so ago.
Yeah,
There was what happened in the
policy,
past, and if you can listen to previous recordings of this committee meeting, I believe it was Mr. Basil who told us there's a policy about membership on the board, and if you miss 2 regularly scheduled meetings, you can be removed from the board. However, there are legitimate reasons that you can miss meetings. Work, I know school is included, if there's a health issue, like there are exceptions to that. Like if you're elected to the board and you just don't show up and you have no reasonable excuse, the board could remove you from the membership, and I believe that has to go, then it goes to the court system. There's a very lengthy procedure, and we were discussing that because in the past, there have been board members who have been traveling, for business. There's been specific board members who have been traveling for business, and they missed more than 2 meetings in a row, and they were still very much involved in the district, and they were doing their job. They just missed a few meetings for their job, which is a valid reason. And there were questions: could this board member be removed? And I'll give my opinion. I don't think they should be able to be removed, and I think that was the opinion of the board. But it turns out Mr. Basil educated the committee by telling us that it's a very, very difficult threshold to reach, because if it's up to the individual board member, if they believe they had a compelling reason to miss a meeting, that is the standard that has to be met. I believe that's by the courts. They set that precedent.
Now, is that policy here somewhere?
That policy is not in our thing. The policy is the membership policy, and that's in the 000 series.
So why are we having that discussion now? Because it ties into the telecommunications.
It ties in. That was one of the. Now, I know I use the teleconferencing policy quite a lot, and I'm trying to keep it not about me, but this was also put into place not just specifically for me. I wasn't even on the board when it was put into place, but for those other board members who were traveling for business, who were traveling for other reasons that they could participate. And so hopefully future boards would not really entertain the idea of maybe throwing somebody off the board because they had to be out of the physical district.
But leaving this one as it is doesn't in any way conflict with that other policy?
No, I mean, leaving any policy the way it is, I don't think conflicts with anything, because it's the status quo. It's been vetted by the solicitor. We can always leave the status quo.
Then can we agree on this one or disagree?
Sure. I mean, we can. I'm not advocating we change it at this point. I
agree. I
think
like it.
For the sake of Mr. Martino, to review it.
I mean, I think if it becomes a problem with abuse, because we certainly don't want a cyber board.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
And that being said, there is a recourse if, like, let's just say in 10 years, you have board members who are elected and they change this policy, because a board could change one of these policies by a 6-3 vote at any time. And the public doesn't like having board members call in all the time, or there could be an election and those members could be thrown out, or a new team could come in and that policy could be reverted. In the end, every 2 years, half the board is up for election anyway. But I don't know. So I guess.
By the same token, maybe in 10 years, everybody will be.
On the other hand, maybe there'll be a
public
policy.
will be. So I mean, we're just talking about the here and now, right now.
Exactly, and that's all we can do. These
policy.
policies change.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
So
I like it.
on that?
Any comment from your perspective?
I feel like we haven't done anything.
Okay.
We didn't make any changes.
Well, we reviewed it.
Which is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to review. Okay.
Well, I think we are going to make some really good progress now that you're aware of we have the booster policy.
Yeah, I agree.
I
I'm excited if we can get together in a short period of time and we can close any holes. Mrs. Kiesel checks with her people and make sure.
All right, great. And I hope that we can get back into the habit, and this is something I spoke with Mrs. Kramer about, of reviewing when this committee set out. I was the chairman the first time around, and we were just going through every single policy in the policy book, and we were going through each one and looking for areas to change because they haven't been updated. If you turn to one of the last pages here, you can see it's the typewritten policy, and it was adopted in 1987. It was last revised in 1995. And this is something Dr. Otto really wanted us to just go through and make sure that everything's current. And so that's what the original purpose of this
I would like
was.
to discuss the service that somebody recently brought up. I can't remember if it was Dr. Sanker or not. To actually have them reviewed by PASBA and have our whole set, it was PASBA, offered the service to review them all and bring them all up to date. And then we would just bring them to committee and discuss them without having to go and worry about the wording.
That was something that, back
I would like
when
us to consider that.
That was something. Now, this committee has been in existence now ever since I was and Mr. Wolf, we were sworn in for our first terms. And that was something that came up because PASBA does offer a service where you just send them your entire policy book and they go through every single policy, and they'll recommend their changes. They'll type everything up. There's a format that they use and everything. And I think they digitize it too, and you can view it online and search it.
And then we could just tweak them as a committee.
Now, there's a cost to
Is there different
that.
levels of,
Sure, there's a cost.
of membership within PASBA? Like you have the basic membership, and then you have the gold-plated membership. And
How I think
when
it
we're down
works.
here, you don't get this type of service with them.
How I think it works, and I am the PSBA representative now, I guess. The membership,
Perfect.
there's only one level of membership. Not that I agree with them on many things, but there's one level of membership, and then you add on to it. So you pay the membership fee, and you get, that is the basic level pretty much. And
So
if you want to take advantage
is that
of the
where we are?
services- Yeah, we have just
Which may or may not include the service that we're talking
I
about.
don't
It
think it
probably
does.
does not.
Yes,
I
it would
like-
be an extra
I'm
charge.
suggesting we look into it.
We can look
That's
into
all.
it. I think
Could Mrs. Kiesel?
Mrs. Kiesel,
do
could
that
you
for
bring
us?
us like the cost? I think that'll be the main. It seems to always be the issue. How much does it cost? Maybe it'll be worthwhile. That'll be a decision the full board will have to make.
Absolutely.
But that would definitely speed along the process because this is not a 4-year process. This is a This is a long
By
time.
the time
to
you're
go
done,
through
you'd have to
everything.
cycle back through.
Yeah, and it's good to have.
I'm not sure that we have the
local flavors.
expertise to know.
They probably have such a knowledge
Yep.
base compared
Yep.
to,
How
small
often we
community.
sit here in committee and go, well, what are other school districts
Right,
doing? Well,
right.
this is a way
Yeah.
to bring the best of what's out there in Pennsylvania, and they're proposing to us, based on our circumstances,
Yeah.
this is what we think you should have. And then we're working it the other way instead of from the top, from the ground up.
Yeah,
So I would highly encourage we looked into that.
Yeah.
I'll look into it.
if you can bring
Thank
back
you.
information, that would be great.
You're leaving with the to-do list. You got the biggest to-do list here.
As soon as I catch up.
Okay, yeah, I think that would be good to look into because I remember it was mentioned, but I don't remember details being given.
Yeah.
And if it's feasible, then maybe that's something we do.
You know,
And
we don't get paid as
it
board
could even
members.
save. Now, I'm not sure if this is part of Mr. Super's retainer or Fox Rothschild's retainer, but they have to go through and make sure what we're doing is
Yeah,
legal.
that's a good
And if that's not
point.
included, we could be paying extra for that. So maybe
That's a good point.
going to PASBA would be a cheaper.
Right, because they're already
alternative. I'm not
legally
sure.
vetted.
Again, I'm not sure what Brian's contract is, but that's just a thought.
So that's great, and you're researching that, you'll be
Yes.
able to bring that information to
Yes.
us. Here's what it will cost, because I'm sure it's thousands. I'm
Yeah.
sure it's 10, in
Yeah.
fact, it seems like I heard $12,000 to
Okay.
do it. But I'm not saying that specifically, but Mrs. Keith will be able to tell us exactly
Yeah.
what we are paying for, and
So you're
To
also
make that
wondering what
decision.
we're paying the solicitor to review?
I just want to know
well-
if
what they're
Yeah.
offering in the rewrite is already thoroughly legally vetted.
and it would be
right?
good.
We don't
Yeah.
have to then have it vetted by
Right.
our
Yeah.
attorney.
Right.
It's
That's
already
correct.
done by their
Now, if we
attorney,
wanna
so
go
there
in
won't
and-
be
Okay.
redundancy.
Now, if we want to go in and make changes to what they submit, I think that would be something that's within our. It would obviously be within our purview as a board. They're our policies,
Yes.
not PASBA's
I think that we would want to,
Yes,
as committee,
and
double
we don't want to
check.
just adopt everything
Agreed.
they're telling
Agreed.
us. So it might
Agreed.
require Mr. Subers to review the changes we make.
Well, that's true.
But,
Yeah.
but
But
even
it would
going
be
through,
much more
because
targeted.
if a policy hasn't been changed since the
95,
80s or
how are
95,
we-
laws change every few days.
How are we
So-
equipped to make that?
And it would be helpful, I don't know, I think it would be good to get information about it. And not only that, but the service, not just the cost, but what their service actually is.
Sure.
Any details that would be helpful.
Okay,
Then, like,
great.
if we do decide we want to go down this route, I think it would be on this committee to make the recommendation to the board.
Yes. And get the full vote, you mean?
Yeah,
And then probably the work that would have to be done after PASBA
yeah.
sent their policies, we would still be doing the work in this committee
Yeah.
to tweak them.
Yeah. All right.
So-
well,
Before you, are you moving along?
yeah.
Okay.
Do you have something else you'd like
At
to?
the end.
Okay.
Are we still going to do 902 today, though?
902. That was tied in with the public participation earlier.
I guess
Mrs.
pretty much,
Kramer
yeah, there's
included
nothing
both
new
of
on
these
here. Okay.
because we have
Okay.
two policies. And unless, it actually might be good to look at it quickly just to see if it conflicts with what we
Prepared
just read
statements that
earlier.
are to be read to the board should have a copy presented to the board president prior to their being addressed. When 3 minutes are over, you're asked to be seated. Comments to the public and it's pretty much what we said. It's just a matter of enforcing them.
Yeah, because they don't raise next to your seat, they come to a podium. But
Say that again, Mr. Wolf?
Number 3. Comments by the public will be made at the designated section of the agenda by rising next to the
Oh,
seat.
that's a good point.
That was
Right.
probably
We
back
don't
when
do
they had
that.
meetings.
We've
and-
had people shout from their seats.
By not rising from the So
that should be
that should be
changed to go along with what we. But you see, this is something we'd get to.
We would get to.
We would get to eventually. It's what a 900 policy, so not for years, but that is. And
It's related though, and,
Yeah.
and it doesn't
We
seem
could
like it's
fix
really.
that.
It doesn't really look like it's out of.
We could put that, come to the podium and sign in. State your name and sign, right? So we have a record, a documented record. That is the policy.
That's our policy right now.
Our procedure, so our policy should match our procedure.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see anything else.
You know, they can always get number 5. They can get copies from the administration at any time. I think 6 is basically almost saying the same thing.
Superintendent reports versus other public members' documentation. 5, I think, is if the public presents something.
Like committee,
we can't give them
committee
copies.
meetings. Like if they wanted
Oh,
something
that's
from
true,
this
too.
from this meeting,
Right,
you know.
right. Just request
Yeah.
the public document. Otherwise, I'm
So we will be making a change. I guess we're going to recommend they change item 4.3 to reflect what our policy is,
Right.
as opposed to
Right.
what this says.
Then you can
Yeah.
scratch one off the 900 list.
Yeah.
there you go.
Last revised, 2014. So this is how they did public comment back in the 90s.
How about it?
All right. Mrs. Kiesel, could you convey that to Mrs. Kramer then, or if you'd like to just give her my notes here, would that be better? What I wrote down, I wrote, please update to reflect current procedure.
That would be great, thank you.
And then she can email me if she needs specific language,
And
and we
it's
can bring that.
specifically number 4 under 4 also. We're not looking to make a change there, right? Because I think that was the part that Mr. Martino wanted us to specifically look at, whether the public should comment on each section of the agenda, or just at the beginning and the end.
Well, I think for the sake of policy, it's better to... The agenda can be... Well, who makes the agenda? The president, the secretary, and the superintendent write the agenda. So I guess it's up to them where public comment is included. It's required to be included at the end by policy. The policy doesn't require it to be after each section. That being said, the policy also doesn't say it can't be included after each section. So there's some flexibility in there, it seems, with whoever's writing
with
the agenda.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So, and I think personally that's a better way to do it, because it's up to each individual board. The public is still guaranteed their right to comment at the end of the meeting per policy. But if the board wants to add add comment periods, why not?
Okay.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
No.
Do you agree? Okay.
So you're saying keep this the
Yeah,
way it
keep
is?
4
the way it is.
It's just
Give
3.
them-
We just
okay.
want to make a minor, and it's nothing. We're not changing the way things are done. We're just making sure our policy reflects our procedure.
Okay, good.
All right, so that's all that we have under new business. Mr. Wolf, you have something?
Yeah, we got into the discussion of class rank,
Yeah,
and I
we have a
Spoke
policy
with-
I just saw.
I spoke with Tom Henkel last night at the concert, and he had mentioned policy 212, where he thought it stated that they were locked into 3 months, or after the third quarter. That's when basically the positions were locked, but that's not what the policy
Yeah.
actually says.
I remember I saw when I was going through policies for this meeting, I looked at this and I saw class rank, and I was wondering if it would.
Because it specifically
explained it.
says throughout the year.
Yeah.
So I was just going to follow up with Tom about that. So he knew that I don't know because it was changed just last year. So
Yeah. There's a
maybe
reason it
last
must
year,
have been, yeah.
maybe last year it was changed from it did have that.
Well,
in the
actually,
policy.
I'm not sure if it was. Actually, I don't think it was changed. I think it was just reviewed. Up here, it doesn't have a date listed or date last revised, but only reviewed.
I see.
I don't know. Maybe changes were made, but I don't think so. Seeing it's a 212 policy, I think we did make it to that portion of.
But if you would read that, do you see anything that can be interpreted that way?
Because I read this when I was going through the policy book online, and I was specifically looking for that, and nothing stood out to me when I read it online.
Well, the only comment that I had was under the one part where about it says mentally retarded. And I thought I thought that was a term that the district didn't use.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
How should we guys see it?
Yeah.
What should we change it to?
I mean, Dr. Otto had a specific term for it.
I think Mrs.
I think that's an obsolete.
Do you mind if I read on this?
No, go ahead, please.
With her advisors.
Take it with me.
Maybe it would be a good idea, and this is something that we could just recommend to the administration, to go through all policies where it says mentally retarded and change it to a new term.
Thank you.
It keeps changing. So
Yeah.
I was going to make sure you had the most current.
And it would be good to make sure that we're... Now, maybe that's a term...
He was actually Dr. Otto was very sensitive to that. I know he changed it on many policies.
Okay.
So
I'm surprised this went through.
Exactly. I found that maybe this just was an omission.
Yeah.
You know.
And it would be good to make sure that whatever term, because I'm sure there's a term used now in law.
Right.
Just to make sure that... And I'm sure this isn't the term.
It's strange, though. They're breaking out that class from special education as a class under special education. So it might be a legal term. If
Also,
it
shall be
passes.
ranked within their year of graduation with the exception. Yeah, so they're not included.
I'm not an expert at all.
Now, does that mean...
It looks like a subclass there that they're specifically trying to identify in the policy.
Well, they obviously are, yeah. But now my question is, does this mean that, like, let's say I graduate in a class of 312, and let's say that 12 students are determined to be excluded from for whatever reason. Right. Does that mean that my GPA would be 50 out of 300, or does it mean my GPA would be 50 out of 312? Are we just saying these people don't even warrant inclusion in the... I don't know. I don't know the answer.
With the exception of those people.
Or does that just mean that they do not receive a class rank? And if that's the case, I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know, because that's...
I wasn't even thinking about it in those terms, but I see your point.
Yeah. And I don't know what the proper recourse even is, because you don't want to have somebody... Well, I don't know.
Maybe we can get
I think
the
some clarification, like,
on that.
What is the current... What do we do now?
Again, if all our policies are rewritten by that, those things go away. For us to dwell on.
But, I mean, the point that policy says that those grades are determined throughout the year.
Yeah.
So, really, the day before graduation, or whatever it is before their finals are done, you know, that class ranking could change after their finals, and because the appropriate... because what happened in that situation, that person went from 3 to, I think he said 3 to 5.
Yeah.
But yet they went home with the $1,500 scholarship.
Yeah, and that was something...
was not fair.
Yeah, absolutely. In the curriculum committee, because that was the procedure, it was determined after third marking period. What they do now, from what Mrs. Rexroad said, is at the end of the third marking period, they notify the top students, and she said something about the top 10, and I'm not sure if she notifies all the top 10, but she lets them know that currently you are ranked this position in the class, so we recommend you begin working on your speech for graduation. But that being said, if your GPA changes, you may not receive that honor if you're no longer ranked at that point at the end of the year. So just be aware. And I think that if people know that going into it, then they will not deliberately tank their grade, knowing they don't have to worry about anything because it's locked up.
I mean, he had mentioned specifically that he can't change like who the ranking is, but he has control over who gets the money. And
so
it doesn't that policy doesn't sound like that's
true.
The rules of the road for that.
Looking at the scholarships,
they're one and the same.
Yeah.
Even if it's the day before, the top 5 people should be doing their speech for whatever they're going to do.
Yeah.
And
I think that's accurately representing what first, second, and third in the class
And
is.
I think this, I don't think we should change this at all. I just,
Yeah, thank you for
I think
bringing
some
that.
familiarity needs to be made with the,
This
Yeah.
clearly says that the board authorizes the system of class ranking, but that the superintendent shall develop procedures for the computation of it and the assignment of class and rank to implement the policy. So the policy says we want it done, but it says the superintendent.
Well, that's how everything really is for this.
That's what I'm
It's
saying.
the
It doesn't,
administration to carry
it's
it
not really
out.
our role to weigh in on it. So.
Well, to weigh
because-
in on it,
right,
yeah.
because I'm sure the AP class scores are weighted higher than,
Like
you know,
that
just a
type of
generic,
stuff, yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and that's included in the course selection guide, which is developed by the administration.
Is that, do you think
but
that's what that
ultimately
means?
I think that this was passed in 1987, and I guess this was authorizing the superintendent to come up with a system to do it, and to determine the weightings. Like, I don't know what preceded this, because I'm sure there was class rank. I don't know how. Yeah, because you had valedictorians going back before 1987, so there was a way to determine it. Maybe this was just clarifying it.
I think whatever method they have is fair, because that
Yeah.
doesn't seem to be the issue. Was, you know, that class ranking could change, and you know, just because it changed with like 3 weeks left to go in a school
This was
year.
something that was brought up in the curriculum committee, not at our most recent meeting, but at the meeting before. You had an issue where students were going to the guidance department and asking what their class rank was almost on a daily basis. And it would fluctuate because some teachers didn't have all the assignments in and other teachers did, so it was never an accurate representation of what the class rank was, except when you got your report card after all grades had been put in for the quarter. So we were giving out faulty information, and the question was asked to the high school administration, well, if you're doing scholarships or if you're doing recommendations for students and it needs to know class rank, what do you use? And the answer we received was, well, whichever one makes the student, I guess, look best, whether or not that's accurate or not at the time. And that was an issue that the committee had, because you can't be giving out numbers that are faulty. And if you're comparing,
We felt that you could have give out a class 2 ranking on Wednesday, and Thursday give out another class.
it could be class,
second.
it could be 5, depending on how close everybody is at
you
the
could
top.
give 2s out all week,
Yeah,
because
so-
it could change day to day.
Yeah.
And is that really?
What this is when you're comparing one person to a class of 300 people, it needs to be on a level playing field. And if some people don't have all grades put in, some people have.
Should be at certain periods.
Yeah,
of
it
time,
needs
and
to
then
be
it's
once all grades
as
are in. And that was
referencing
what the
that
curriculum
period.
committee recommended to the
Mrs.
administration.
Kiesel was agreeing too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because that's well,
Right. The
and
current
then
policy, though, is very,
that has
It's
to be
clear.
a burden on those people having to constantly
Yeah.
look it up.
and it's
You
a
know.
burden on our staff to keep looking it up.
Exactly.
It should be a report printed quarterly or whatever we decide at the
Yeah.
end of.
Yeah, so thank you for bringing that to the attention, I guess, of the committee. And if you could pass that along to Mrs. Torsha, just
I
to
will.
make sure, if you'd like to keep this. And then if you can also get a question what we currently do regarding Section 2 and excluding specific people from class rank,
Okay.
that would be helpful, just to know what our current procedure is. Can we authorize the administration to go through our policies and just like search for the term mentally retarded and change it to something?
I think the current terminology is intellectual disability. I believe that we
Okay.
Can we
Now-
ask that all our policies are updated?
Now, I have a question about that. What is that, intellectually disabled?
intellectual disability.
Intellectual disability. What is the
I don't know that
threshold,
they
though,
could,
I
though.
wonder?
Yeah.
Because,
We
like,
could just-
you could have 100 students
Why
with
don't
some
we
type
wait
of
and see if PAS
intellectual...
was going to rewrite our policy?
Well, I think we need to get also legal clarification, because you don't want your policy to exclude more people than has to. Maybe this is law. This could be a regulation too from the State Board of Education. I'm not sure. I think we need
you have Ms.
clarification.
Makowski and others that specialize in this thing. That's what they're.
Yeah.
This is their
They should
job.
know.
They
Yeah.
should know.
Okay, so if we can get information on that
Sure.
before going through and changing anything in mass, I guess we need to know what's going on. But okay,
Okay.
I'm glad we had
Good.
that discussion. So is there anything else under new business? All right. Is there any public comment? Okay, there's no public comment.
Yeah, 3 minutes.
Yeah, 3 minutes. Yes, there's no public at this meeting. Next meeting date. What do we want to do? Do we want to...
I would suggest we had another quick meeting just to review the boosters in 2 weeks. if at all possible,
What date?
to make a recommendation before the next COTW.
I'll be
ballot.
unable to participate, but quorum is only 2.
And you could weigh in.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, I'll
You
weigh in
could,
when we
yeah.
vote. Yeah, and I can communicate.
So we can take something to the committee of the whole?
Well,
Not May, but June's?
You also want to have whatever meeting that we have next to discuss that, to invite the 2 booster presidents and the PTO person as well, so they have an opportunity to, read the draft and comment.
when would work for you guys? Because you're going to both have to be here. If I'm not, I'm going to be traveling internationally for the sake of the minutes here for employment purposes, so I will not be able to participate. Now, the voting meeting, I believe, is on the 26th, Monday the 26th of this month, of May.
No, that's Memorial Day.
Oh.
It's
No,
next
it's 19th.
Monday.
Oh, it's the
It's
19th.
coming Monday.
Okay.
That's right, yeah.
Never mind, I have it on my calendar incorrectly.
But we are having the special meeting next Thursday.
Okay.
Special
22.
voting meeting. If everyone agreed per Mr. Martino's email today.
Yeah.
So what about, and what time is that? Mr. Wolf?
So Mr. Martino mentioned to me that they're having a finance committee meeting.
6:45 finance committee followed by an 8:30
Okay.
meeting, special voting meeting.
Now, are you on the finance committee?
No.
And you're not on the finance committee? I guess you could do it
Do
before.
you want to? Would you want to?
Sure, why not?
Okay.
An hour before?
We're going to be, well,
Might
the
want-
thing is, that they did say, Mr. Martino did say that a lot of the financial information is going to be discussed
Oh, yeah.
in finance.
You might want to be there
That
to-
would be good
yeah.
preparation for the voting meeting, because they're going to talk about the budget. So we probably want to be there.
We don't. Maybe it's more convenient to decide
That's
this
fine.
right now. But if not, if you want to communicate by email and set up a time, that might be better. I don't know. Or we could-
Can you try to pick something out for us to meet? And Mrs. Kiesel or someone from the admin? Just to talk about the reconciliation. All I need is a week. If I can just look at it for a week, I can put my best input and.
And the
Yeah.
administration is going to need time to make the changes to the policy. so
long before the changes. It's just for us, and then we want to.
Well, wait,
we want
when-
to come to consensus here, and then
Yes.
put it out to the boosters and.
When do you want it to leave this committee? When do you want it to be in the final form this committee will recommend?
Well, see, here, I'd like to, I don't want to have a meeting where we discuss it, come to agreement, then invite the boosters. They have ideas which we will incorporate.
Yeah.
I'd
Oh, I
like
see
to,
where you're
kind of
going.
get,
Okay.
Bring them together,
Because
yeah.
I think, unless I'm wrong, this policy hasn't changed since I've seen it last year. And it was, to my knowledge, just needed
Yeah.
to be vetted
Was ready
by
to go.
Mr. Subers and Dr. Otto, and it was ready to go.
Yeah.
Now, I can't, so I'm not going to speak for either of the booster organizations that they had concerns about it, but I think the next meeting, if we between us, since you can't make it, we should invite the 3 organizations that this would apply to.
I thought we should meet one more time so that we had a consensus in committee of what we're recommending.
Okay, well, I mean,
First.
I'm fine with that. I just don't, we could come to a consensus, they could have an issue, and then we're back to changing it again.
And I'd be okay with that.
Okay, well, why don't we do
It's
that?
just, for me, it's just
To get your
complicates things.
hands
out.
head around it
Yeah,
and-
see what's on the table, what I think is the hole missing, and then say, okay, now how's it look again?
But there's no reason why that they couldn't be notified to come be part of the public during that meeting as well.
I'm fine with that, actually.
Yeah.
That's fine. We'll all agree to look at it prior.
Okay.
We'll hear them weigh in, and then
Okay,
we'll
so we're
decide.
looking for a
And
single
then we'll
meeting.
come back
Then we'll-
and make a decision.
And that could help it go faster too,
Sure,
because then you
yeah,
don't need to
that's
have
fine.
multiple
That's fine.
meetings.
Okay,
So
yeah,
the
the more I
question
think about it, I'm
remains:
fine with that.
what date and what time and
Well,
where?
it has to be a publicly
Advertised meeting, yeah.
so it has to be, what's the time? on that?
I mean, do you know what the time is to advertise? You can't have it this week.
So the week
I think
after
after
Memorial
that.
Day? One
Okay,
day?
so you want to do it?
20,
Yeah, that's fine to
29.
advertise.
I can do the 29th.
29th.
Thursday, the 29th?
It's the time is
Yeah,
going to be,
fine.
is a little tough for me to.
Well, whatever
to get
time you
there.
guys wanted
We
to.
can do
We
whatever,
were
yeah,
just
why
doing
don't we do
5:30
the
today
29th?
because that was the time we established before you joined the committee.
want
Right,
to
it's
Is it
not
a
like we
6?
inconvenience the public.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What
if
works
we-
for you?
If we
Yeah,
could do
that's fine.
6, I mean,
Yeah.
that way I can, maybe stop home, grab a
6 o'clock,
before
29th.
and I wouldn't be yawning.
And Mrs. Kiesel, you're just a fill-in, right? You're not going to be a regular, or, I mean, you'll be a regular fill-in, right? I don't mean it like that. We would expect Mrs. Torsia, so we would have
believe
to
so.
check her schedule also.
But you're thinking
Thursday.
Thursday, May 29th.
Not that you're
at
not
6
welcome, by
o'clock.
the way.
Yeah,
You can always be part of the public. And
no, and even anytime you want to weigh in on anything that you think is, we're looking for the best solutions for the district.
I don't want to speak for Mrs. Torsia, but I did think that she wanted you to have a role in policy. Is that? Oh, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe I should.
Oh, look.
I'm not sure.
Okay, well,
I don't know. Because you're welcome to participate as a member of the administration and come to the table. And thank you for helping us tonight.
Okay.
But,
I can
yeah, keep
discuss
us
it
from
with her.
okay.
making, going off in the wrong direction. That is not good for the community.
Thursday, so we're doing Thursday the 29th at 6 p.m. And I believe it'll be back in this room. That's kind of where they want to have meetings now. So is that fine with the committee?
Yep.
Okay. In admin library. Mrs. Kiesel, could you get that to Mrs. Kramer so she
Yes.
could advertise it? Okay, great. So that's taken care of.
And, I mean, it doesn't have to just be booster. If anything comes up.
Well, the PTC, you'll want to let them. Oh, I mean, yeah, if you
No, I
want
mean,
to add.
as far as the agenda,
Yeah.
if it's a fully fledged, open, 2-week notice, maybe we can have the answers
Yeah.
to some of those other things by then,
That
too,
might be
and
good to have a
wrap up.
presentation. Yeah. So it'll just be on one of you guys to chair the meetings since I won't be here
Yeah.
physically.
I'm sure Mike can do that.
Um,
Okay,
I
good.
like how you slipped that in.
May I run?
All right.
I like the way
Well,
you nodded.
all right. Well, this meeting is adjourned at 7:05 p.m. Thank you, everybody.